Hello everyone. Welcome to the session on the story The Boy Who Painted Christ Black, written by Henrik Clarke. Before we start the story, I would like to pose two questions before you. Question number 1. Have you ever felt neglected because you were not allowed to do something you wanted to do? Has someone ever told you that you were not worthy of doing it because of some features in you? Question number 2. Have you ever neglected someone else because you thought that the person was not worthy enough to do that? This module in the course Literature and or as Identity talks about such alternate identities. Identities where you felt that the person was not the same as the others, and so he was not worthy, he or she is not worthy enough to do certain things. This story is one such story which presents an alternate identity. The author, Henrik Clarke, was an African American writer who was born in 1915 in Alabama. He was born into a sharecropper's family. What is a sharecropper? Sharecroppers are those farmers who rent a land and do cultivation there and give a major part of their share or of the cultivation to the landowner. In Malayalam we say, "Paatathinu kodukka." So he belonged to one such sharecropper family. His father was a sharecropper. His mother was a washerwoman. So he belonged to this very humble origin. He was a very poor African American boy who grew up in Alabama. His mother naturally wanted him to become a farmer, just like his father. But he felt that that was not the mission he was called to do. So, in 1933, he left Alabama and he went to the place called Harlem in America, a place where a lot of black Americans, a lot of African Americans lived. So there, he started gaining scholarship and he became one of the prominent members of the Black Power movement. Black Power movement was a movement which arose in the 1960s, which emphasized on black nationalism and black consciousness. Basically, the Black Power movement intended to inspire the writers, inspire the black people to feel that their blackness is not a cause of their inferiority, but it is something to be proud of. So they instilled racial pride, they instilled the feeling of self-sufficiency among the black Americans. He was one of the co-founders of the Black Academy of Arts and Letters. In this Black Academy of Arts and Letters, the people, they encouraged the black people who could write, who could do some kind of art, and that talent in them was prospered. And he also became a writer, mainly of prose. One of his famous novels is The Confessions of Nat Turner. He has written a lot of short stories depending on this theme of color. One of the short stories that he has written is On the Other Side, a story of the color line. Second one is Leader of the Mob, a story of the color line. The third one is Santa Claus is a White Man, the story of a color line. Another famous short story is what is prescribed for us, The Boy Who Painted Christ Black, which is a short story. This story, as we see from the title, is about a small boy named Aaron Crawford. Who was extremely talented as an artist, and he paints this picture of Jesus Christ as a black man, which has caused a lot of uproar in that school where he studied. The story sequences the events which led to that. We are going to watch a very short video, animation video, which was created by one of our students in the second year BCom class.
The Boy Who Painted Christ Black, written by Henrik Clarke. The Boy Who Painted Christ Black is a short story about a black boy named Aaron, but the narrator is another student from his own class. Aaron, a talented boy, had big drawing skills. Being a black young fellow, Aaron Crawford was the smartest boy in the Muscogee County School for Colored Children. His teacher always looked upon him as the ideal student. For his teacher's birthday, Aaron gives her a painting that caused an uproar and a turning point at the school. A picture of Christ painted black. She was so happy for the gift that she told him it was the most wonderful present ever. Later on, she asks Aaron to tell the class how he came to paint the remarkable picture. Aaron tells them that his uncle, who teaches Negro history at the YMCA, once told him about many great black folks who had made history, and he said black folks were once the most powerful people on earth. And when he asked about Jesus, Uncle said that no one ever proved whether Christ was black or white. Somehow, a feeling came over Aaron that Christ was black because he was kind and forgiving than any white folks had been. Thus, he painted Christ black. Teacher invited other children to come forward so they could get a complete view of Aaron's unique piece of art. And then took the painting to the Negro principal, George Duval, who was also stunned and proud of the rare piece of art done by his student. The school term ended the following week, and Aaron's picture, along with the best handwork done by the students that year, was on display in the assembly room. Naturally, Aaron's picture graced the place of honor. That day, a tall white man, supervisor of all the city schools, Professor Danville, made a visit. His eyes flickered in astonishment seeing Aaron's painting. He demanded sharply, "Who did this sacrilegious nonsense?" To which Aaron replied that he did it. The professor attacked Aaron and the principal with words, while the principal defended Aaron, saying that he encouraged the boy to do the painting. Finally, principal accepted a summer job as an art instructor of a small high school somewhere in South Georgia and took permission from Aaron's parents to take him along so he could continue to encourage him in his painting. The story shows us how people can be judged and publicly humiliated only because of the color of their skin. It also shows us how people stand up for their beliefs.
As you saw in the video, the title suggests everything about the story. The Boy Who Painted Christ Black. And as we said, the boy is Aaron Crawford. And what has he done? He has painted a picture of Jesus Christ as a black man, as a Negro, and presented that to his teacher. So the events that happen after that become the crux of the story. The story is set in the Muscogee County School. in Georgia. And the main character, Aaron, is described in detail in the beginning. Aaron is said to be the smartest boy in the Muskogee County School. The teachers considered him as an ideal student who was even capable of becoming the President of the United States once if he were a white man. His color is described in detail. It is said that he was not simply a black man, but he was so solid black in color that reflected some kind of inner virtue in him. His physique is also described in detail. The narrator says that it would not be right to call him too ugly, nor to call him too handsome, because both would be unjust. And he is presented as a kind of person who has just come out of some ancient history book. So with all these introduction about Aaron, we understand that Aaron is considered as one of the assets of that Muskogee County School. For the teachers, he was an admiration. For the students, he was a mixture of awe and envy. As we know, his talent for painting was what brought him to this level of acknowledgement. The teachers believed that he would one day become someone like Henry O. Tanner, another African American painter who became well acknowledged by the French society, by the artists in the French society. So that is about the first character, Aaron. The second character is the narrator himself. Who is the narrator? The narrator is also a small boy who belonged to Aaron's class. He was a classmate of Aaron. And we see that the entire story is told from the perspective of this small child. That is why he says when he saw Aaron, he felt that something was coming. When he saw Aaron with his painting, he felt that something was coming. He says that students looked at him with envy because they could not be like Aaron. So the story is told from a child's perspective. And one important thing about this narrator is that there is a small transformation happening in the character of the narrator. In the beginning, we see him as a person influenced by the white gaze. White gaze simply means if you look at the world from the perspective of a white man, you call it white gaze. So from the beginning, you see that the narrator has this idea of white gaze when he talks about Aaron. That's why he says Aaron was too black, he was too ugly, he could not be called too ugly or too handsome. He could not be placed anywhere, but his talent could be acknowledged. And then he says, when he talks about the white man who comes to the school, he says that the white man was someone who was tall in size, who had grey hair and the blue eyes. There is a story by one of the African American writers, Toni Morrison, who talks about the blue eyes of the white people. That story talks about a girl who craves to have that kind of blue eyes. So this narrator, this small boy, also seems to have so much of admiration for that blue eyes. He says that when the white man came into the school, the entire school became silent. There was so much of admiration for the white man. But the transformation happens when he witnesses the principal of the school and Aaron Crawford moving out of the school being proud of their black identity. So that is the moment when he gets transformed. That's a moment. It's a slight reference in the story. Moving on, the third main character is the teacher. The teacher who is given the birthday present. Initially, we see that she is as excited as the students on her birthday as she comes to the class. And when Aaron comes with something huge in his hand when Aaron comes in with this huge painting in his hands, she feels all the more happy about it. And it is said that she has a half smile when she sees Aaron. So we see that the teacher is someone, this teacher in the story is a person who loves her children, who appreciates her children. But one action of the teacher needs mention. It is said that as soon as she saw the painting of Jesus Christ, which is painted as black, which is presented to her by Aaron, as soon as she saw the painting, she jerked her hand away and looked at the painting unbelievingly. So we find that she was shocked to see such an image in Aaron's painting. But slowly she covers up that. She does not show that publicly in front of the students. And you find that she is the one who encourages Aaron to speak about the painting. So Aaron, when he speaks about the painting, he introduces us to another character, an uncle of his, who teaches Negro history at YMCA. This uncle is the one who instills that inspiration of painting Christ as black. Aaron says that uncle told him about the black people, how powerful they were once upon a time, and how they lost their power over the course of time with the coming of colonization. And Aaron innocently asks about Christ, and uncle says that no one has proved Christ as white or black. Every tribe, every people, every race, they have their idea, they have their own idea of their God. And especially for Christians, when the Bible begins in Genesis, it is said that God decided to create man in his own image, in his own likelihood. So that could be the inspiration for Aaron to paint Christ as black. He says that Christ was also a kind man. He was also an innocent man like the black people. So why not believe that Christ was also a black man? So that is about his uncle. The next character is the principal of the school, who is given the name George Duval. The principal is one of the characters in the story who exhibit this black pride. Because we find the principal only towards the end of the story, towards the climax of the story, at the school term closing day. He is seen to introduce Professor Daniel in the beginning of the school term ending function. And then later, Professor Daniel, when he gets angry at seeing that image of Jesus Christ, which is painted black, he stands with the child, he stands with Aaron. And he says that it was I who inspired him, it was I who encouraged him to draw that painting. So we find that black pride in him. We find how he is proud of himself being a black man. He does not feel that inferiority feeling when Professor Daniel asks him things like that. And when he is demanded to give a resignation from the post of principal, he very happily does that. It is evident from the narrator's words towards the end of the story that the principal did not show any kind of regret for having supported Aaron in front of Professor Daniel. Instead, he happily moves out of the school, he happily leaves his position as the principal, and he takes up a smaller job as an art instructor in a small high school in the nearby village. And he takes Aaron along with him, probably because he felt that if Aaron continued to stay in that school, he might be discouraged from being proud about his black identity. So that is about the principal. The next character is Professor Daniel, who is introduced as the supervisor of the city schools, including the schools for the colored people. Professor Daniel, as I said before, he is introduced as a tall man, a handsome man, with grey hair and blue eyes. The blue eyes, the narrator says that the blue eyes are the liveliest thing that you can see on his face. So Professor Daniel seems to be very scared about the black people. That is why it is evident from one of the dialogues that he says. He says that if only Christ was a nigger, whereby he means that if Christ was a black man, then all this authority that the whites took upon them would be gone. So you find some kind of hidden fear within this Professor Daniel. And later, Professor Daniel starts imposing on the black people because he does not want to lose that power. That is exactly the reason why he gets angry at seeing that painting by Aaron. He asks, who drew this sacrilegious nonsense? He cannot tolerate the idea of Christ as a black man. The principal's reply becomes important here because he says that every religion, every tribe, every race, they have tried to imagine God in their own imagination. So that is about Professor Daniel. This work, entire work, The Boy Who Painted Christ Black, revolves around this one single painting of Jesus Christ, who is painted as a black man. The painting is also described in detail by the narrator. And in narrator's perspective, the eyes of Christ were deep set and sad. It looked more like a helpless Negro pleading silently for mercy. So the painting of Christ can be looked upon as a symbol in the story. What does it symbolize? It symbolizes all the sufferings that the black people have been through. It symbolizes that if Christ was a black man, he would not be that same happy man on this earth, because blacks have throughout history suffered oppression in the hands of other people. So that impression that the narrator gets from this picture of Christ is relevant here. Once more, he says that the eyes of Christ were deep set and sad. It looked more like a helpless Negro pleading silently for mercy. Now coming to the conclusion of this session, this work can be seen as a representative work of Black Power movement. As we said before, the Black Power movement was a movement which emphasized the black nationalism and black consciousness. It tried to instill pride in the people, in the minds of the people, to be proud about their black identity, to make them feel self-sufficient, that they don't have to be dependent on the white people to live. So how does this become a representative work of the Black Power movement? Number one, it challenges racism. It challenges Professor Daniel's perspective of Christ as a white man. It challenges the Professor Daniel's imposition of whiteness as a superior identity in the minds of the black people. Because you see that there are people who emphasize on the history of black people. That is where this uncle, principal, and Aaron become important, become relevant. The uncle who tried to talk about the black people who were once powerful on this earth, the principal who says that every tribe have their own version of a god, their own image of a god, so why not paint that? And Aaron Crawford, who goes all the way to paint Christ as a black man. You see the courage in him. You see the courage in him when Professor Daniel asks him, who painted the sacrilegious nonsense? And he replies, it was I. Even though you see the fear in the child's eyes, the child seems to be confident that he was the one who painted that. That courage which he derived from this history of the black people. The courage to draw Christ as a black man. We also see that there is a questioning of the white and the black power roles. As we said before, Professor Daniel seems to have a small fear in his mind that if Christ was a white man, if Christ was a black man, then things would have been different. Then probably the black people would have ruled over the white people. He has that fear out of which he tries to control the entire black situation there. So because of these three reasons, because of these 3 points, we can call this work as a representative work of the Black Power movement. We can also find a lot of allusions in this work. There are allusions to George Washington, the first US president. There is also an allusion to Booker T. Washington, who was an African American educator. There is also a reference to Henry O. Tanner, another African American painter who has established himself in the French circles of art. So to conclude, I would like to move into the first 2 questions that I posed. Have you ever felt neglected because of some features in you? Or have you ever neglected someone else in spite of their talents because you found that that person would not sync with us? This story is the right answer to that. It gives us the idea that people are unique no matter what they are. It is not based on their color, it is not based on their physical features that we judge them, but for their merit, but for their worth.